to call Mr. Vinny here. I told him 30 seconds, and it's been 31, so he's probably going to bust my chops. Here we go. Greetings. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is, not that the listeners should ever know our failings, but this is our fourth go-around? We got it now. I think we're good.
Hey, third time's the charm, fourth time's the harm, something like that.
Oh, that's good. I only knew $3 for $1, so...
Well, and the rest of that, it turns bad, so we won't finish it. The censors will get us. But...
Fair enough.
So, Mr. Wellein, I'll do a brief introduction here. Well, we don't have a name for this podcast series yet. We intend to crowdsource it on social media and on the site. We've got a couple of, you came up with some good ones. And for now, this is ModState. And with me tonight, this is Jonathan Vinny out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And with me tonight, out of Detroit, Michigan, is not only a blue chip addition to our staff, but a partner in the enterprise. Literally, it's this week we become Nate Wellein, and so if you would, Nate, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you, man. First off, I'm flattered by blue chip addition. I feel pretty honored. It's great to be part of ModState. I know we're kind of figuring out what the podcast is going to be named, but I think hopefully our listeners and fans will be able to help us with that. But yeah, just ETS out of the military, which is getting out of the military, quite frankly, and transitioning back into civilian world, which has been awesome. It's been an absolute pleasure to be brought on here at ModState, and I can't wait. I can't wait for what we're going to do. As for our background, I know kind of like some random guy who's in the other best French city in the United States is on a podcast but yeah, we go back. I joined the military in 2010, 2011, and met you when we did a branch realignment at the National Military Medical Center. So it was my first boss. Actually, in the military, was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, which was a complete cultural shift. But yeah, man, we clicked. I remember all those nights we sat in the locker room when we should have been taking care of patients and discussed Nixon and Reagan economics and geopolitics, and here we are about 6 or 7 years later doing
somewhere around about. Yeah, you introduced me to George Friedman's The Next Decade, which I'm eternally grateful for.
Yeah, his books really have kind of shaped how I view the world, and minus my other social platforms or what I believe, but really I think, I put it in my article on the website. It's just kind of helped me dictate how I look at the world and how I view the world, and gives me some sort of sanity in this crazy blue dot that keeps spinning in the universe. But
and not only were we friends when you were in the Army and I was in the Navy, respectively, but also we have another. It could be an internal rivalry here. You graduated from one Big Ten school, University of Michigan, correct?
Yep.
And I'm studying economics at Penn State right now. So, I figure if you can survive the Army-Navy rivalry, you can survive anything, we always left that at the football game. It was more fun than anything,
More fun for the Navy because the Army gets destroyed habitually.
Not last year.
Oh, except for last year. You're right.
Hey, my father was in the Army, and I believe his brother was as well. So I've always had a kinship for the Army. And you remember, my co-founder of the site, Al Aldine, was my enlisted boss there, and I have immeasurable respect for him. So when we kid around about Army and Navy, just so everybody knows, it really is a joke. But beyond that, so you're on board. The Bidding Wellein Limited becomes an official, is the majority stakeholder in ModState this week. The LLC is being absorbed, and so we've got, I didn't even take to point that out, that New Orleans and Detroit, the two of the oldest French establishments in the Western Hemisphere here. It's interesting.
Absolutely.
real quick before we dive right in, just a quick shout out to a few people at groups. Number one, I've got to give it to Crazy Eddie of upstate New York and his firm Overwatch. They've taken over doing the audio engineering for our podcast now, and they've committed to opening their new studio hopefully this November, the latest shortly before Christmas. Opening their studio here in New Orleans, and the city can give me a key to the city later as a thank you. But so there's that, and also thank you to Microsoft for letting us and their affiliate program. It's a start. Also to Mr. Jeff Shepard, who's the author of The Real Watergate Scandal. He and I have had a wonderful dialogue recently, and he's given us some historical perspective. He's been a true gentleman and given us a lot more time than I frankly thought it deserved. And thanks to him.
Absolutely.
And last but certainly not least, to some people that have already been great friends and sponsored, Peter Clevenger and Dave Highlander. Thanks to them, they're private citizens and they want to stay away, but their support helping us get going has been great. And also, the former mayor and current city councilman of Porterville, California. I told you about him. Mr. Cameron Hamilton. He's a Navy veteran. He's got a mutton chop, mustache. How great is that?
I'm working on it.
Great. When's the last time you saw a mutton chop?
Probably in like a 70s rock album cover.
That or, it's either a Spinal Tap or a Tombstone, probably. Didn't Kurt Russell have a mutton chop or something? No. I forget. But Kurt.
Either way, I got a sexy image in my head right now.
Well, a great guy, Navy veteran, and he keeps me on point. Our first big political conversation, we had a disagreement, very respectful, about Speaker Boehner's leadership at the time, and his one statement to me was, "Look, I'll follow you. I'll support what you're doing. Just always be honest with me, regardless of your positions." And I said, with that, I can live. And so as we get going tonight, I want to stress to our listeners, and I hope we can call them fans or supporters, and even those who listen to this and go, these guys are full of it, that we, like the cheesy tagline we have on the site, we really mean it, that all nonviolent views are welcome at the proverbial table, and we want to. We've got some things, as everybody's going to experience, I think we've got some things that we disagree on, but it's important, and I think I know we've lost this on a number of levels, the ability to have a civil discourse in this country and disagree. I mean, does that resonate with you?
Well, honestly, I'm a podcast enthusiast, aficionado, if you will, and I love the fact that it's a platform where we can legitimately talk about anything without being censored or told what we can or cannot do. I think that's important. But even ModState as an entity, and why I'm so excited to jump on board, is because I think that there's just something missing, and I'll get into it later on in the podcast and on why I have some of these questions.
Yes, our second topic is going to give you every opportunity.
Yeah, and again, I come from a position that I actually have more questions and I'd like more answers, and so unfortunately, as informative as I want to be in some of these, I would like to be to listeners on these topics. I think I'd rather spark more debate and more questions and try to get more answers, and we'll get into it, but 100%, I just think every time you open up a news organization or a news outlet, you're going to get some sort of bias, and I will do my best to not bring a bias, because I think that it does a disservice. At least for me, it will create a disservice for society, and I think that's why I like ModState so much, is we could put all those views out there, and I think that's just what's lacking right now. And
the fact that you and I are able to admit that. It's weird. I had this conversation with my parents this weekend. I'm about to turn 33 in July, and by no means do I know it all. In fact, I'm at the point, you're there, is I know now what I don't.
Yeah.
So the importance is the preponderance of debate, the propensity for debate, and having this dialogue that is lacking without everything being nah, or let me tell you what this individual did back in the day that they're ashamed of. It's got a point. Americans want our leaders to be honest, but we punish them where they are. We say we want cleaner politics, but yet Super Bowl audiences packed those three farce debates. So,
but
we're on a mission
in
here.
that defense too, I mean, it was a spectacle.
We set them up. I mean, absolutely. The second debate, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The charade. Yeah.
It was. So that's all it was.
Yes, and we don't. That's another thing that you and I both have in common that I feel like we've done a good job at so far with ModState is not so much anybody can cry about a problem, but venturing a solution, even if we don't have one, saying not to crowdsource everything, but hey, let's at least. How many times, Dana? Honestly, I mean, I don't have an answer. And if you have an exact figure, share it. But proverbially speaking, how many times did you and I start out talking about something? And even if we didn't have a specific direction where it was going, we ended up coming up with, hey, well, yeah, maybe that's the way to.
Yeah. I mean, even if it is the point that we can at least move forward in a conversation. So we might not have a perfect solution, and I would never expect us to have a perfect solution. But what I can say is that we were able to move on from just not liking each other because of a topic. And I think that's where society's stuck today is we're so tribal. And I'll come back to this over and over. I don't mean to go on a tangent right now.
It's true that we can talk about this because you and I were in two of the most polarized. People don't realize that it goes beyond, for some people, it goes beyond the football game. You and I were in polar opposite organizations that did not want to work together. They didn't care that Congress said we're going to. In the mid-'90s, Clinton was president. President Clinton was in office when Congress said, Army, Ramsey, Walter Reed, y'all are going to leave Georgia Avenue and go over to Wisconsin. It was way above our pay grade. And yet people involved, so you and I actually can talk about this with some authority.
But because we had to. And so one thing people don't understand, I mean, historically, and there's so many people out there who may possibly not care about this, but when you look at the military, and we can both speak about this now, thank goodness, because we're out, but, we were forced at that level to cooperate. We had to, or it failed. Whereas the lack of cooperation, unfortunately, kind of happened on the upper echelons. So, and that's not, I'm not attacking
and those people weeded themselves. No, there's no names mentioned, but those names, as you and I discussed in the book we were actually working on together at that time, a lot of those names that you're referencing, they worked themselves out of the picture because it was either cooperate and survive. And think of it, those of us that did, it became a beautiful thing. And you were there how different Christmas 2012 was from Christmas 2011. Mm-hmm. It became this beautiful thing that everybody was, wait a minute, all right, I see what you're getting at. I mean, it became great. And to me, it was a testament of you can do this. But all right, so we'll get back to that again. The second issue on the docket is where you're going to really get your chance at that. The first issue is one I'm going to hand it off to you to take over. But the first issue on the docket tonight is the discussion of abortion, and we can go into Planned Parenthood and reproductive rights in general. But it's abortion from the perspective, and this is going to be highly irregular to some people, especially my family being Catholic, but we're going to talk about this on the basis it sans religion. We're going to talk about this of administration of policy based on, as I understand it, the overall, what is the net, not utilitarianism here by any means, but what is the overall best good for the American people? So take it away on that issue, please, and set us up.
All right, well, welcome to ModState.
Or set me up, rather.
Yeah, welcome to ModState, Nate. I mean, I was a little hesitant at first to use this as a topic, and it really wasn't like, hey, Davini, what should we talk about? Well, we should talk about abortion, but I have to.
That was the last thing on my list.
Yeah, and I quite frankly don't like to touch this with a 10-foot pole, and I can't really see anything in when I open up any apps, Politico, CNN, HuffPost, anything on a top story that's trending about abortion, but it's based on a personal experience. And I ETS from the Army on the 27th of March. So not too long ago, a little over 60 days ago, but I've spent the better portion of that entire time traveling the United States, seeing friends, catching up with people who know you enough to be honest and are willing to answer questions or at least have a dialogue about things like this. And so that's the preface for this entire thing. I'm not coming into this with any preconceived viewpoints. In fact, my goal with this is to find some common ground where we can it's such a vitriolic, it's such a decisive topic that even people in my own family can't move past it when asked these questions. But I really, truly ask these questions from a place of genuine curiosity. And I realize that I'm totally creating these adjectives and trying to preface this entire
thing. It's okay. I will say, not to argue with you at all, but we're not to that point yet, but we do, as we've established, everybody does have their biases, and it's naturally. It's like people say, well, we can't legislate morality. Well, actually, we do. Okay, that's how we tell you not to kill. So
exactly.
You do have a position here, as I understand, Nate. So set that up, and bear in mind, for those listening, this is discussing what to do regarding this issue and taking because God said so out of it. And that's not to mock anybody. My family's Catholic, so this is not intended to be disrespectful to anybody, but we're wanting to, if nothing else, we may be setting ourselves up for failure here. We probably are, but we're trying to set a standard here by picking, yes, a very divisive topic. And so kind of introduce, bring in what is your sense about this overall, macro?
So what I really want to do and what I really want to ask is, what could we do with abortion if we were to just take God out of it? And I don't mean that, like, you can have your viewpoint when it comes to religion and spirituality and your viewpoints, but this is a free country, and it was founded on the fact that we could practice our own religion, and so you can have yours and I can have mine, whether that is none or it's your family that's Catholic, or a lot of the people that I met are, evangelical or some sort of non-denominational Christian, and you have every right. You have every right.
Such as my wife's family.
Exactly. So I thought about this pretty heavily when I was traveling and listening to a lot of these wonderful people that I stayed in their houses, and we prayed at dinner, and it's beside the point. What I was struggling with was ideology. And
how so?
So I struggle with it because, again, we're tribal people by nature. And I understand abortion, it is fundamentally ending the life of something that has life as a cell or cells or is growing as a fetus. I get that. And I want to extend, without talking about my political views or where I lie on the spectrum, I want to give people who are pro-life, I want to give them Roe v. Wade. I want it to be overturned. I want to give it to them. And this can be easily taken out of context.
Yeah, if somebody plays a clip of that,
which is fine.
So why do you feel that? Why would you? And by giving that, you mean you're going to overturn it, say, hey, you get what you want. Now what?
Yes, you get what you want, but now what? So
why is that an issue? So, as far as you set that up, why does that present a conundrum?
So this is the ideological issue that I have with it. So if I give it to you, then that means that every unwanted pregnancy now is a life. And that's a beautiful thing.
Pretending there's no back alley abortions, every pregnancy gets carried to term.
100% gets carried to term.
Okay. As if that we'll stipulate that's mathematically or scientifically possible. So
we're living in a dystopia. This is a perfect world. Obviously not going to happen. But let's pretend that we overturn it and every child is brought into this world, which is not a bad thing. I think it's fundamentally, a good thing. But then we get into this weird crossroads of ideology, and we start becoming tribal as people, where we've got conservatives and liberals are fundamentally pro-choice because we don't need anyone to tell us about our reproductive rights, and as conservatives, every life is meaningful, and therefore we should regulate.
The sanctity of God.
We should regulate. We shouldn't regulate, or we shouldn't put forth a murder in this country. And I understand. I totally get both sides, 100%. But where it gets fishy is the same people, and I'm generalizing a bit, but I can't say I'm that far off. It's not like I'm marginalizing this population. It's pretty widespread from my evidence and observation. How do you, and I would just like to know, what do you have in place to make sure that those children who were unwanted, or those pregnancies were unwanted, regardless if feelings change.
Now they're all here.
Now they're here. And quite frankly, and the only authority I come with is the fact that I've been in medicine for almost 10 years now. And I have a very interesting perspective when it comes to unwanted pregnancy and socioeconomic status. And it's a real thing. It isn't... I find myself, and this is where this becomes controversial. I've been in places where there have been unwanted pregnancies, but the support network for those individuals who have that unwanted pregnancy is great. It is a great support system. The only thing that they run into is the fact that religiously it was not the right thing to do, so they love the sinner and they hate the sin. But because the support network is so great and because biologically it's your child or it's your family member, and you're going to support and lift that person up, those children overwhelmingly have a wonderful life. But that's not the reality for a lot of unwanted pregnancies out there.
So let me kind of, and I don't mean this offensively. You've done a great job bringing this in. Let me clean this up as far as, because I know I've discussed this with some people that are inevitably going to listen to this. So what they were, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to mischaracterize by any means. But what we're getting at here is that, so we want every pregnancy carried to term, but and we are generalizing, but a lot of the people that feel that way, and I know them as well, here in the Deep South, they want every pregnancy carried to term, but by God, once you're here, if your family's poor or whatever, there's not going to be a social network. Good luck to you, kid. Like Ron White joked, we're going to pin a $20 bill to your chest and wish you the best of luck. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're driving here. Right?
I'm becoming long-winded about it because...
I don't mean it that way. I just wanted to clarify because I know where you're at.
Yes. So that's my issue with ideology, right? So and that's what I was making the argument, or not the argument, rather the observation that a lot of these people that I've met who really are pro-life have created a really wonderful life. And I'm not saying that people in other socioeconomic statuses won't create a good life, but that there's a reason. And that reason isn't necessarily fundamentally because they just don't want the pregnancy and they don't want a kid. It's because a child is an investment. And for those of you who don't have children, and again, I don't, but I'm an uncle. Most of my friends have kids, and it is an investment that requires 24-hour involvement. And for those people who have a good socioeconomic status, even if they do, it is still a difficult process. So ideologically, the same people, and I'm generalizing, but it's pretty dang close, man.
They're opposed in general to any sort of expanded social safety net.
Social safety nets, exactly. And so my question is, how do we, if I give you the overturning of Roe v. Wade, if you are fundamentally, ideologically for the reduction of federal government and social welfare programs and social programs, then what do we do with these people? Like, how do you have your cake and eat it too without being like, I'm not trying to be really my whole idea here is to question, but this is what I see. I really do see people who are very well off and have wonderful support groups, and a lot of these people have great spiritual religious communities. And what I want the other question that I want to ask, aside from the fact that what do we do if we're ideologically opposed to social welfare systems to help these people, is what do we do? Because this is a free country. Not everyone needs to, be beholden to a God, a Christian God, or any God. So we can't use God as a backup, or we can't use it as the base on which we're going to make life better for these kids who are, unwanted pregnancies. It's not that their parents. It's not that their parents don't. It's not that their parents don't love them. It's just that how do we take care of an expensive addition to a family but we can't bring God into it. We need to figure out, because everyone's free to practice how they want to practice.
That's true.
So, and again, we're talking about government, and this is a separation of church and state, so we can't invoke religion into government to then help with these programs. And that's where my questions, without going any more long-winded, these are my questions that I have. How do we do this? How do we take this almost observable contradiction? But I want to know why it's not a contradiction. This is why I'm asking the questions.
Right.
What do we do? How do we come together? Do we do it at a state level? Are the states going to be just as involved as the federal government is? Or?
Well, that's the first of all here is that I, on a categorical level, believe, like a lot of other things, it's a stretch to invoke the Commerce Clause, which everybody knows that is how, when you wonder why is the federal government, how do they have the authority to tell Louisiana and Michigan, for example, how they can, because it affects interstate commerce. Okay, I'm going to argue here that that's a big stretch with abortion. It ought to be taken back to the state level. Beyond that, I will put out the caveat here. Do I believe that we should legislate according to the Bible? No. There's a separation of church and state. We got to be careful with generalization here in the sense that we rule over one another in God's name. It says it at the rostrum behind the Speaker of the House's hat. It says it on any cash you carry. Okay? So it's a dangerous stipulation to say we can't, because, well, in a way we do. We do legislate morality. And so taking God out of it, and again, I'm more playing a devil's advocate here because I believe that, like so many things, that government has gotten involved in answering questions it has no business even trying to solve. So I'm saying that feds ought to stay out of this. But
okay.
As far as
go ahead.
How do you discuss this without God?
So I'm just going to back up for 1 second, because I think it's important that we discuss. I think it's something that should be regulated to the state. And again, I don't have a political affiliation. I'll remain biased for the sake of this podcast, but you hear that a lot in conservative rhetoric, that we're going to leave it to the state. It's sort of like and we'll have a whole nother podcast about this, I'm sure, but it's the legalization of marijuana. You ask someone who is a senator in the federal government or a congressman in the federal government, you say, well, what's your stance on legalization of marijuana? They say, well, I believe it's a. So
you feel like they're punting the ball?
Punting the ball to say, well, I think that's something we should send to the state level.
That the same way. I just that's not by any means what I'm doing, and I do have a further answer on that. But continue.
So my question is, if you continue to have the same ideology through the federal government into the states. What's to stop the states? Because now we've passed the buck, and passed the buck is I don't mean to say pass the buck. What I really mean to say is we've now delegated it. That's a nicer way to say it, to the federal government, to the state government. How then do we? Where is the assurance that the same ideology at the state level is going to do anything to protect children in low socioeconomic statuses from a family of an unwanted pregnancy? Like, I guess my thing is, where is our assurance for that? Because I heard that a lot on my travels. Well, I think it's something that should be regulated by the state. Well, it's like, well, if your state's conservative and ideologically we're against social programs,
then you have a choice. You have a choice of geography, for one. But this is an inverse. If you think about this, we were discussing this, and we'll get to this later. But for a man to have to choose which side was he going to wear, blue or gray?
Yeah.
That was based on his state. You think about where we were in the past; it was unconscionable. You know, D.C. is a perfect example. You go there, you know it wasn't intended to be much more than the White House and the Department of War, as it was called at the time, because it wasn't equipped to handle 9 million in the metro area. So back when, not saying it was a golden era, but the way it was set up is the federal government, the central government, was subservient to the states. We can't fathom that now. So for me, it's literally not a passing the buck thing, but the issues here become, number one, I'm not against a social safety network. I do think that we need to incentivize where possible able-bodied people to work, but I also know that we have an issue with automation. There's a number of economic things coming down the pike that the 50s and the 90s, people need to remember, that was absurd economic growth. That was not normal. Okay, we're never going to pass. We might not ever pass that way again. But as far as specifically on abortion, I can argue it based. There's a number of hypocrisies in how we look at things. Okay, here, for instance, if you kill a pregnant woman, abominable as that is, there's dual murder charges.
Yeah.
Okay, but then if it's an abortion, a decision to terminate the pregnancy, then that's within her purview. So there's an obvious hypocrisy there, okay, in my opinion. But beyond that, we've scientifically proven, I'm sure you saw this, I believe it was on Reuters a couple of weeks ago, but there was actually a microscopic photograph taken of the moment of conception in a lab. In a laboratory, they inseminated, fertilized an egg, and it was actually a flash of light, an electrical discharge of light. Okay, well, so I'm making the argument here that you can rationalize a pro-life or anti-abortion view based on, remove God from it. It is life. And as far as the social safety net goes, again, I believe it should be there, but to me, it's not quite as contradictory as perhaps we're wanting to make it seem, because some people genuinely believe that it should be a states' rights issue, and some people genuinely believe, okay, how much of what I make are you entitled to, and why?
Yes.
Because you have chosen to go, and this is a generalization, but because you've chosen to go to the frat house and you drank too much and weren't responsible and got pregnant and carried a pregnancy through the term, that we don't want a life taken away. Remove God from it. I believe it's a life even then, however small.
Yeah.
So why are the taxpayers to be taken to task fiscally because of your irresponsibility? And that's a devil's advocate question. I'm not saying I feel that way.
No. And I hear you loud and clear, but we talk about holding the taxpayers accountable, or we discuss. I mean, statistically, we talk about the young lady that went to the frat house, and we'll use her as the proverbial example here.
But the woman gets caught, okay? So we're very clear. There's slime balls out there. Then, she doesn't know who the DNA test.
Yeah, and
the poor woman is the one exposed.
We're using it as an example. My things, the thing with that and the questions the follow-up questions I have is, like, there's, coming from working in inner city, and I did for several years.
Our two cities are very similar in their problems.
Very similar.
Abandoned homes, crime, poverty,
and
water.
There is something to be said about resources and education. And obviously most people know how a baby's made. It's pretty obvious, and I'm not trying to talk about social pressures and that's not the point of this. The point is, when we start talking about religion, and Catholicism specifically has a pretty firm stance against contraception, but yet over and over again, and more specifically in this very 2016, 2017, there has, and we could make some footnotes for this, which I probably would be pretty helpful, about some studies that showed several counties that had very aggressive, progressive contraceptive programs that they're handed out at high schools and middle schools, and they're not promoting sex. They're having realistic sexual health and reproductive study classes.
And the rates have dropped exponentially.
And they have dropped precipitously because, unfortunately, the reality is, whether you want to invoke God or not, people are having sex. They have been